Hello and welcome to The Visible Artist. My name is Sophie Loxton-Lucas and I'm delighted to bring you this conversation from Gallery Space Level 3 in Wicker Park, Chicago with Vincent Uribe. Vincent describes himself as an artist and creative community builder. He is the founding director of Level 3, an artist-run exhibition space and online publication, and the director of exhibitions and external relations at non-profit Arts of Life. Through these roles, Vincent works with hundreds of artists, sourcing new talent for the gallery and creating innovative showcasing opportunities for artists with disabilities. Along with hard work and a strong vision for each of his projects, Vincent's success is due to his open, collaborative approach, an approach that is unusual in the art world, and this has served him well over the past 10 years. We discuss his journey since graduating from the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago, his experience of launching and maintaining the volunteer-run gallery for over a decade, and how he sees his own artistic practice in relation to his curatorial work. For any artist considering opening their own space or wishing to collaborate with others, this is the episode for you. I hope you enjoy it. Hi Vincent, thank you so much for having me in your beautiful gallery space.
Thanks for coming. I'm glad to be able to host people in here again.
Yes. Well, you've been here for a while, haven't you? I remember visiting probably about 4 years ago.
It was that long ago, yeah. So time flies. Yeah, we've been partnering with you all since you came to Chicago, which we've been really excited about. And then Level 3 has been around. This exhibition that's up right now is our 12-year anniversary show. So we've been doing our programming for quite a minute now.
Yeah, so I really want to talk to you about that. As you know, the podcast is a podcast for artists and about all the different directions they can take, perhaps the traditional gallery routes, but also other ways that they can get their work out there. And I'm excited to be here chatting to you because you seem to be a master of collaboration and meeting other artists, and you're a gallery director, a curator. Could you tell me in your own words what you do?
Yeah, I do. It's always tricky because I do a few different things. I mean, overarching, I think title is really like art director. I consider my art practice bringing people together through community, but through Level 3, which is an online publication and an artist-run exhibition space where we've been doing year-round exhibition programming for the past 12 years. I oversee all of our exhibition programming and publications that we do here. A big focus on bringing artists together through exhibitions, introducing them to Chicago. Most of our exhibitions focus on doing small group shows, usually 2 or 3 artists per show, a local Chicago artist, and then pairing them with somebody from around the country or around the world so that these relationships could hopefully naturally start to form by doing these sort of collaborative shows together. Additionally, I'm the director of exhibitions and external relations for Arts of Life, which we're a nonprofit art studio supporting adult artists with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I've been doing that for a little over 8 years. I really love the work that I do. The work that I do at Arts of Life and Level 3, they all kind of feed into one another and support one another. Arts of Life has 2 locations, one in Chicago in the Westtown neighborhood, and then one in the North Shore suburbs in Glenview, and we have 2 exhibition spaces. So I oversee all of our in-house exhibition programming as well as all of our external exhibitions and outward-facing appearance of things. A big part of our in-house exhibitions is focused on integrating our artists with disabilities alongside artists from the broader art community. So I often bring in guest curators that are usually artists that I know and meet through Level 3 and invite them to look at our full roster of artists. We support 60 artists with disabilities and ask them to curate a show with our artist community alongside, their network of artists that they're friends with. So tend to work with artists from all over the country and really try to push people's professional development.
Well, I'm really excited to talk more about Arts of Life because it's a truly exciting, inspiring organization. So we'll come on to that. But to start with, let's talk about Level 3 because this is where we're sitting. It's such a beautiful space. I love how you actually have the space here. There's lots of white walls to let these artworks really breathe. And coming from London, often maybe don't have that luxury quite as much.
Yeah.
But we're really in a really thriving neighborhood in Chicago, aren't we? And you've got this beautiful space.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have, I mean, it is somewhat of a white cube. It's an odd space for those who, like myself, that are very familiar with it. It's changed over the years, where we had hardwood floors that were unpainted, and then we painted them white at one point, and now they're a soft gray. So it is a very more clean-cut space with white lighting. It's a fairly large space, I think, for Chicago. I consider us a live-work space, more of an artist-run space. I used to live behind the gallery for about 10 years before I moved out and turned my bedroom into an office space. This neighborhood was always a thriving art community. It's been pretty heavily gentrified over the years, but we've been able to hold on to this home base for a while and hope to continue to be here as long as the building exists for.
So tell me about how you started the space.
So Level 3 kind of started a bit on accident. I was invited to move into here to just be kind of like a roommate. There were several roommates who were going to the School of the Art Institute with me at the time. I was a student. I was a sophomore, my second year in school. People moved out. There was sort of a change in leadership, and then this ended up kind of falling under my control. I was always interested in the idea of doing exhibitions and was very heavily involved in the art community, and more specifically like the alternative gallery scene, artist-run space, apartment gallery situation. And when this space fell under my control, I had never put on an exhibition before. I didn't even know what curating a show or selling a piece of work looked like. I was still kind of a baby, I guess, in that sense. But some friends really kind of convinced me. We threw some names in a hat, and Level 3 was the one that came out. A friend built our first website. A few friends helped volunteer to get the space completely painted white, and I saved every paycheck I got from doing campus tours to put in lights. So spent about 2 months trying to renovate and get the space clean. And then a big focus of mine was like, how am I going to get people to come to an exhibition that I'm curating? Like, I didn't really know anybody. I was still kind of new to Chicago. So my thoughts were really wanting to disrupt this trend that I was seeing in terms of these smaller artist-run spaces being very insular and friends showing with friends, and then you walking in not knowing anybody and feeling like you don't belong. And that was always kind of an issue for me. So my goal was to always try to introduce new artists to one another. So we had our first show. I reached out to 3 different artists that I didn't really know, but just kind of admired their work from afar and asked them if they wanted to do the show. I was opening up a gallery that I didn't really know how to run, and they were generous enough to agree, and everyone got along really well. And I think that's kind of where I realized the magic happens, is introducing artists to one another, having them see each other's work, and then start to develop shows organically with one another. And that's kind of been our model since. So we do year-round exhibition programming. We're open at Level 3 every Sunday 1 to 4, as well as by appointment. But it also now stems from this interview series that we run. So we have an Artist of the Week online interview. So that's really like the foundation of like our way of doing studio visits with artists without having to physically do studio visits.
And how do you choose those artists, the artists you interview online, or how do you find them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination between me and my current team. We're constantly researching folks through, social media, going to other exhibitions, traveling, references by other artists that we've interviewed. If it's somebody that we like their work, we will reach out and see if they're interested in doing mostly email exchange interviews. And if those seem to go well and we like how that rapport went, we'll then try to figure out a way to incorporate them into a show. And all of our shows will try to consider, where the artist is located, the medium. I always try to, we tend to not just do a painting show or just do a photo show. I always try to mix up these mediums and artists of different backgrounds and identities so that we could have like a very diverse group of folks being introduced to one another and learning about each other's work and hopefully continuing to support one another.
Well, even the show we're sitting in now feels quite diverse. You were telling me about the different artists and where they're from and even their ages. It's the real mix. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the fun things is like being able to work with folks across the full spectrum of, the art community. I think we tend to work with folks who are often on the emerging side, but I think transition very seamlessly into the more mid-career, more established realm of their practice. And I really love this idea of interspersing artists with one another who don't know each other, and so that they could learn from each other's practices and grow. And we've had artists who've shown together who've then gone on to curate each other into other shows or collaborate and do things elsewhere. And so, helping build those connections, I think, is super rewarding.
Well, there seems to be a real genuine spirit of collaboration, and that's how I think we met, was through someone recommending that I get in touch with you, and you have been really kind to introduce us to different artists, and it seems to really work for you, being generous with your connections and what you're trying to do, rather than trying to keep it to yourself or be private in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's something, I feel like folks have commented on in the past, where like, don't you get upset when a gallery picks up one of your artists and starts representing them and you don't get the credit or the sale? But like, to me, it's not about that. Like, I want people, I'm a connector of sorts, and I want to support the creative community as much as I can. And those introductions, the more I could help people individually succeed, I think we all succeed with. And so I think those kinds of, I think I try to be very transparent and not keep things too close to me. One of the joys that I think I get out of working with artists is the friendships and the relationships through working with artists very genuinely. And I pride myself on like having really strong relationships with all the artists that we have worked with. And there's no reason for me to hold those too tightly. I want them to go out and do more and do better and like rise above what like my small operation could offer them.
And it sounds as though you use those relationships to then find new artists as well for the shows.
Yeah.
So you're always going out to different cities and visiting studios of artists that you may find online.
Yeah, I think that word of mouth, those recommendations, like it's one of, to me, the easiest and most like, not valid, but trustworthy ways. Like if there's an artist that we've shown here at Level 3 and they want to recommend somebody to us, I already have a rapport with them and they know how we operate. They know sort of like our shoestring DIY sort of approach to things, even though from the outside it maybe looks more formal than it actually is.
It looks very professional.
And so like, I think that's one of the things is like folks who maybe aren't from Chicago or don't have a relationship with us, it could look like a more established thing, which I think is good, and it helps people's work shine and their profiles thrive. But when those introductions can happen and people, understand that we're coming from this place of wanting to support an artist and their practice at this genuine level, and it's not so much about just trying to profit off of people. I think that's where like a genuine connection is formed.
What do you think makes a successful relationship with you and an artist when you're in? It seems like it's a very friendly atmosphere, but it is still a professional environment in that there's expectations on you and
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think that's something I always try to be really upfront about in terms of what we could provide as an artist-run space and what our responsibilities are. But I think, to me, a relationship is something that is also mutually beneficial. You know, if we're going to go through the effort and energy of showing an artist and putting on a show, I'm hoping that the artist involved is going to understand that energy and put the same energy into the work, into promoting the show, being appreciative. To me, if those things happen mutually, then that's when something is successful. I think it's sometimes when folks maybe assume that we have more of a means than we do, and we're able to, you know, we don't have a production budget to be able to, you know, cover costs for artists like framing and things like that. But we will promote the work as best as we can, and I think that's a big part of it, is like being really into the artist and trusting their process. Because oftentimes, by the time we reach out to an artist and invite them to do a show, we're happy with all of the work that they produce. So it's maybe a little less curating of the work and more curating of relationships. We want to show what the artist is most excited about showing. And I think if we continue to do that, it naturally works its way into the show, and the show will naturally come together. We often don't know what an exhibition is going to look like until we're in the space unwrapping all the work, and sometimes we're like, how is this all going to like flow together? This is very different. But because we trust the artist and we trust kind of the process, it always ends up being a very fruitful experience.
That's great to hear. I think it's an interesting time because there is quite a pushback on artists not necessarily doing things for free and sort of saying, well, I want more than exposure, and that's really good, especially when they're working on a high level. But then there's also the reality of working with artist-led spaces like this and not expecting too much. So I suppose having that honest relationship means you can be frank about it. Yeah, we're always very upfront about that in our initial outreach to folks. You know, we always start with an interview, and if an interview goes well, then we'll try to figure out a way to incorporate them into an exhibition. But, you know, also as an artist-run space, we'll offer artists, you know, we generally give artists 55% of all sales that happen. So we give artists the bigger cut because we want to be able to support their practice. We'll be able to cover return shipping of the work. We try to, you know, put it on the artist that we're not able to cover, you know, round trip transportation, but if they get the work to us, we'll figure out a way to get it back to them. And so we try to be very upfront about what we're able to do and hope that it could be mutually beneficial. And if it's too much of a stretch for somebody, or if it feels like it's not a right fit, we want to also honor that and say, you know, like, we understand if this doesn't make sense for you, or you have these other expectations that we can't meet, like, no worries, like, we don't have to do this. And where do you see Level 3 sitting within the art world of Chicago? I think we're in this like weird, funny space often where we're not necessarily this like big for-profit situation or this super DIY space. We're often right in the middle, and I think I've come to really enjoy that, where a lot of the artists that we show, sometimes it's their first big show that they've been invited to do, but also we've shown artists who have more established careers and more established practices, and being able to intermix those audiences and those artists, I think, is really beneficial for everyone involved. And I like this place that we've kind of carved out in this model that seems to work, both personally and professionally, where we're able to get a lot of the fun stuff done that we enjoy doing. You're an alum of the Art Institute of Chicago, aren't you? And do you see yourself as an artist? Did you study fine art? Yeah, so my background, I moved to Chicago for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, initially to study film, video, and photography, but I knew I wanted to come to the school for the interdisciplinary aspects that it offered, of being able to customize like a degree to all the things that I was interested in. I was interested in everything, painting, fibers, sculpture, ceramics, graphic design, like arts administration. And so I was really able to like I was doing everything, and I was able to get everything out of it. And I think
I feel blessed to have been able to like customize like my experience there and like really take all those things that I've learned into my professional life. Like I'm very familiar with various aspects of, different mediums of art making because I dabbled in all of those. But my practice as an artist really is community building through events and exhibitions, and bringing people together as an art form, whether it's a party, exhibition, on a dance floor. I think that's where I really see my practice develop, whether it's, sometimes it's visual, performative. I still I'm still using my creative energy through all these aspects of curating, bringing people together, installing shows, doing events, things like that.
Well, that leads us on to talking about Arts of Life, because it feels as though you bring a lot of that to your role there. Can you tell me about that organization and what you do? Yeah,
I joined the team at Arts of Life about 8.5 years ago. I came across it kind of on accident. A friend sent me a job posting that she came across, and I was like, how have I never heard about this organization? I bike past this address all the time, and nobody I know knows what this is. Like, this is so weird to me. It must be fake. So I went in and I walked into the studio, and it was this massive 6,000 square foot warehouse of adult artists with disabilities making work, and I was just blown away on how strong all the work was, and wanted to show it all and wanted to have it all in my own collection. So I kind of quickly joined the team and started forming my roles. I was initially an arts coordinator, helping manage our Chicago studio artists' work, and then transitioned into an art director role, which then transitioned to the director of exhibitions and external relations, which is what kind of my current situation is. But really, Arts of Life is a really special place where we are a progressive studio supporting artists with disabilities to support their professional development as artists. So it's not an art therapy program. It's not an arts education program. We really pride ourselves in supporting our artists with their creative development in whatever it is that they want to do. And so we have 2 exhibition spaces that I oversee. A big part of those exhibition spaces is, again, that integrating our artists with disabilities alongside artists from the broader art community, but also I help oversee all of our external arts programming and exhibitions, and that's how we got plugged in with the other art fair too, and became a partner with you all, because we really, getting our studio artist work out into the public and getting it seen for what it is as contemporary artwork is super important for me.
I remember when I first visited Arts of Life, you talked about how you enjoyed showcasing the artist's work there with other artists that you've worked with and mixing it up.
Yeah, and I think that follows too, a big part, because I'm kind of always working with new artists through Level 3 and artists both locally and nationally. If I ever get an opportunity to pull them into my work at Arts of Life, I do. So, for example, Sam Jaffe is a great Chicago-based artist represented by 65 Grand Gallery. I've been following her work for a while. I've shown it here before at Level 3, and so I knew she was interested in Arts of Life and has been following our programming. So I invited her to guest curate the show that we have at Arts of Life right now, and following a theme of color and pattern and repetition that carries into her work a bit. So she guest curated a show with us. And then because we knew the other art fair was coming up, we figured it was a perfect tie-in and have her curate our booth for the other art fair. So we had her put in some of her own work alongside some of our studio artists' work that have a similar relationship to color, pattern, and repetition.
I mean, it seems like quite a straightforward idea, but it's quite unusual to have that approach, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know why. I think you're right. I don't think I'm doing anything that bizarre or weird, but I don't know why it doesn't exist more often, or maybe it does and it's more hidden, but I don't see this integration and this idea of community building being as prevalent as I would hope it would be.
How have you found the response to the work when you've been showing at the fair?
I think it's been great. I mean, I think it's the more we could engage. I love also engaging with the general public, so folks who aren't as tied into the art community. And I think sometimes those are some of the most fruitful conversations to have when folks kind of see that we are a welcoming space and a welcoming group. I think the art world could seem very isolated or closed off or stuffy. And I think I try to do a lot of conversations or education to folks who don't have these relationships to the art community like I do, to say, you know what, we are more approachable than it may seem.
And can people come and visit Arts of Life and the studio?
Yeah, right now because of COVID, we're not open to the general public without an appointment, but we used to be open more regularly. Now Arts of Life is open by appointment and the general public is welcome. We do a new exhibition every 6 to 8 weeks, and those are open to the public, usually Friday evenings, no appointment necessary. So again, we encourage people to come to those events. We'll do tours of Arts of Life. Again, those are by appointment. And then level 3 is open every Sunday, 1 to 4, and that's open to the public. So pretty much every Sunday we're here and we're consistently having people through the doors because I think to me, consistency is key. When we were first starting off as a gallery space, we'd maybe have 0 to 3 people come in, but because we've been around long enough and our hours have been so consistent, people know to expect us to be open on a Sunday, and we get people coming in regularly.
I think that is true because it surprises me sometimes how hard it is to get a message across to people. I'm working, say, at the fair for a while now, and we're an artist fair, but it's surprising how people don't understand that, and you have to really reinforce the message and be consistent. And the great thing is the Arts of Life have shown at the other Art Fair Chicago 4 times now. So you've got that momentum, haven't you? Yeah,
it's really fun to be able to continue to grow this relationship and our experience with the fair, and also with our community of people. I know when the fair first started, we were really trying to engage our community base and let them know like what the fair was, and for a lot of folks, it was some of their first experience going to like an art fair. And now it's this thing where a lot of people just really enjoy, like, they're very familiar with it, the process and the experience, and it's a very welcoming environment. I think that's something that we always like to be a part of.
Well, it's been a big year for taking the Arts of Life artists out into the public, because you've shown at Expo Chicago and the Outside Art Fair. How were those?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, like, the pandemic was really like a bummer because we were really ramping up to do a lot of these opportunities. We were we were slated to do Expo right before the pandemic, and then everything kind of went to the can. But now that we're starting to reemerge and these opportunities are happening again, the momentum is really great, and being able to have the connection be made for folks who are heavily involved in the art community and see that, we're in New York at the Outside Art Fair, we're at Expo Chicago, we're at the other art fair, and we're doing all these things. Some folks go to all of them, some go to one of them, but we're able to kind of continue these conversations and make these connections with folks that we do exist. We are a pillar in the art community and want to continue to support artists of all, levels, identities, abilities.
Yeah, so tell me about showing at Expo Chicago, because that is an exciting opportunity for any artist.
Yeah, we were super excited to be able to have a booth at Expo Chicago as like a fairly large international fair. It was a big deal for us. I think it was really great to be able to do that in Chicago, which is our home base, and do a really fun booth to highlight 6 of our studio artists, 3 from each of our studios, and show a body of work that we're super excited about, and have conversations with people both locally and internationally who didn't know we existed. And I think the exposure at an event like that is monumental for us. We ran into so many people, had so many people from Chicago or the suburbs being like, I didn't know, where are you located? Oh, you're right down the block. I had no idea you were there. And I think to me, that's so important to get people to understand, we're were around. Arts of Life has been around for 22 years. We're the oldest nonprofit supporting artists with disabilities in Illinois. And so getting those connections made and that realization that like we are here to stay and continue to grow and support the artist community and be part of the contemporary conversation feels super important.
And how about the Outsider Art Fair? Because obviously the term outsider is potentially quite problematic.
Yeah, we had held off on doing that fair for quite a while because we never really identified with the term outsider art. It always seemed like a little bit of an outdated term, maybe more problematic than we prefer to associate with. We don't really consider our artists outsiders. We consider them part of the contemporary community. I think with that fair, it seems like we're really starting to change the narrative, and a lot of folks kind of now understand there are a lot of nuances to the term outsider. Just because our artists have disabilities and aren't maybe formally trained in art doesn't necessarily we don't want to isolate them as other, but I think the way that we're really trying to simplify what outsider art is really just coming from somebody without a formal background education in art. And I think if we continue to share that narrative and simplify it in that way, it's a lot more digestible for us, and it's a lot more welcoming of a term, and it encompasses a lot more that actually is maybe influential in terms of how people see the work.
Well, one last question I have for you is, what advice would you have for an artist that feels very inspired by this conversation and by your approach? They're really early on in their career, not sure how to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I always love this question because I talk to a lot of students, and I've seen, having come up from a very ground up sort of approach, again, kind of being in that middle ground of supporting artists from their first show early on to supporting artists, who are a little bit more established. I think relationships are super important, and I think understanding the value in what artist-run spaces or galleries are doing in terms of showing artists. God, there's like a list of things I can list off. Respecting spaces and arts organizers. If somebody asks you to be in a show, being on top of your communication, following through. If you can't do something, be upfront about it from the get-go instead of later down the line when things are already set. I think I'd rather much hear somebody tell me up front that their schedule is too busy, now's not a great time, maybe next year. I respect that so much more than just trying to cram in another show for the sake. So understanding when to say no or hold off on something, I think is a very valuable skill. If you do start to develop a relationship with the gallery, continuing to understand that that's a two-sided relationship. I love when artists continue to come and support the programming here and show up to shows that they're not in. I think that's really important to show the respect for the space and the artists involved, because it's another way to meet other artists. For artists trying to maybe establish a relationship with a gallery, whether locally or not, is engaging with them, signing up for a newsletter, following on social media. I always I would avoid cold calls to galleries. I still am surprised that I get dear sir or madame, please consider my work for a solo show, and it's somebody who's never even looked at our website. We don't do a solo show, so why are you asking for a solo? They have no idea. Understand where your work fits in, what spaces you're interested in, I think is key. So research is a big part of it. If you do identify a gallery or a space that you feel like your work connects with and you'd like to develop a relationship with, again, developing that relationship more organically through following on social media, in person. We have had great relationships with artists who've sent us postcards or emails and just say, hey, I really loved that show you did with so-and-so. It was a great pairing. And if you're going to compliment the work that a gallery is doing, they're going to naturally want to know who you are, what you're doing. And so it's a more subtle way of like complimenting somebody and being appreciative of what's happening instead of just being like, hey, look at me.
Yes.
So I think that approach seems to be a little bit more accepting, and I encourage folks to do that, but make it genuine and like make sure that research is happening and you're not lying about if you don't like a show or not.
Yes, I think these days it's so easy just to look at everything from afar, just follow things on social media, which is fine, but not actually turn up. But you want to physically, if you can, come to a space and look at the work and think about your work in the space and just really properly engage rather than flicking through.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to always be, some folks don't like the openings because of the social anxiety or whatever, and like it's too many people, but going to a gallery during their open hours is like, that's a great time to have a conversation with whoever's gallery sitting, like ask questions. I think those kinds of things are where if you show up engaged, whoever is at the gallery or involved is also going to hopefully reciprocate that engagement.
Well, I think that's really, really great advice. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And I feel like to me, I forget that it seems so simple, but like a lot of people don't realize like how to approach galleries in this more, softer way.
Yes, I think it's a long game and you want to build a gradual understanding of what you're trying to be part of, and that just happens by turning up. Turning up, showing up, and like understand it's a mutual relationship that needs to happen. And I love the advice about supporting other artists and turning up for shows with other galleries that you've already been part of, perhaps. It's really important as well. Thank you so much, Vincent, for chatting to me today.
Thanks for coming by. I'm happy to do this, and I love sharing whatever I could share to help, even if it's just one person.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me this week. Please follow Vincent at VCintU and the podcast at The Visible Artist Podcast. I hope you have a great week in the studio, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday.